and welcome to Pale Blue Pod, the astronomy podcast for people who are overwhelmed by the universe but still want to be its friend.
Hi, I'm overwhelmed by everything and am friends with the universe. So, we're having a glow up here. I'm Connie.
Like Connie, I am also overwhelmed by everything these days, but the universe has been my friend for a very long time, and I know it's going to be with both of us through these rough waters. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Moiya McTier. I'm an astrophysicist and a folklorist and an author.
Yes. Bestie. Let's talk
That's actually how I
it.
introduce myself. When I meet new people and they're like, what do you do? I call myself an author. Like, I very rarely call myself an astrophysicist out in the wild.
I mean, I still think you get lots of street cred for it, but book smart street cred,
Yes.
It's like an astrophysicist is one of those jobs, where it's just like everybody's kind of impressed, even though they don't always know what you do.
Yeah.
So it's like a nice little zinger to it.
It's a good mic drop moment. I have it in my back pocket for when I need to pull it out. Today, I wanted to add that author bit because we are in a new month. It's the month of August, and it is officially book launch month. I am putting out my book called Mothers of Invention, A History of Creativity from the Greek Muses. So we're doing a whole month's worth of episodes that are related to creativity and imagination and invention.
I love this, bestie. I'm so excited.
Yay, me too. This first installment is actually going to be practice for a lecture that I'm giving all about creativity, its history, the science behind it, and none of this actually made it into the book, but there will be another lecture that is more specifically tied to what I cover in the book.
Right. As a former entertainment journalist and reporter, there's a lot of stuff that you end up researching that just doesn't make it into the final cut. So I'm excited for us to get that behind the scenes, get the background that you accumulated while you were writing this book.
Yeah, the stuff on the cutting room floor. Mm-hmm. I actually wish that this was that. I just never dug into this while I was writing the book. I just was focused on other things. And for some reason, in a book called A History of Creativity from the Greek Muses, not once did it occur to me or my editor to include more information about the actual research of creativity.
Yeah. I mean, you had a lot of other things that you were diving deep into and researching. Mm-hmm. So, I can understand that it just, priorities move as they do.
Yes. You only have so much space and bandwidth. Mm-hmm. I'm just human, friends.
Yes.
But I would love to get your thoughts on the lecture and any suggestions you might have for how I can clarify some things.
Great. I'm very excited.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to call it Deep Dive into Creativity, Arts, Smarts, and Imagination.
Love that. Arts and smarts.
Arts, smarts. And I'm going to start because the audience knows me as an astronomy and folklore professor. That's the department I'm in. So I'm going to start with my credentials. Why am I talking about creativity? Because for the last 3 years, I've been the senior advisor and the spokesperson for the Human Artistry Campaign, which was started by the recording industry and is advocating for regulation and policies around generative AI to protect artists' rights.
We love that. That is a noble cause, and I hope that y'all can do some great work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are doing some really important work, and it feels satisfying, I will say.
Good.
My next cred is that I wrote a science fiction novel. I'm a creative writer, and so I, have my own process, my own practice. Mm-hmm. And then my last credential is that I watch a lot of TV. Just so much TV. So I'm familiar with creative pursuits.
Absolutely. I love to count that as someone who, again, was an entertainment, TV specializing journalist. That's what I did, too. I was I watch a lot of TV. Those are my credentials.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with a broad definition. What is creativity? It is broadly defined as the ability to generate novel and effective ideas. And it's closely associated with other concepts like originality, imagination, inspiration, which, comes from curiosity. We can connect creativity to genius. You can be a creative genius, or you could be an intellectual genius. Although we'll talk later in the lecture about how intelligence and creativity are distinct genetically and in our anatomy. Creativity links to innovation and usefulness. That's why creativity is the ability to generate an effective idea, a useful idea. And you can be creative in the arts and the sciences. There have even been people who talk about creativity in natural processes like evolution in nature. And so it's a term that's used in a lot of different areas. And I think maybe the most useful definition we can put on it is that creativity when you see it.
Love
like
that.
Other things that the Supreme Court has defined as it when you see it.
Absolutely.
In the long history since 1972 of the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, there has been one person to come along and completely change the game with a revolutionary, creative new innovation. And you might know the name Joey Chestnut, but he had the talent. The person with the innovation was Takeru Kobayashi, who in the year 2000 doubled the number of hot dogs from the previous winner's record. Went from 25 to 50 hot dogs.
Wow.
Because he innovated by separating the dog from the bun, splitting them in half, and dunking the bun in water.
Oh, that technique. Yeah, I don't like that one on principle because soggy bread is gross.
That's fair. That's fair. But you can't deny that it changed the game.
Absolutely.
So creativity when you see it. But we can also look back at the history of how people have thought about creativity early on. Let's look at the early history, starting in ancient Greece. Ancient Greeks didn't have a word for creative or creator, but they did have a word that encompassed most of what we would consider art today. They called it techne, and that meant the making of things according to rules. And all of the disciplines, like music, painting, the weaving arts, they were considered techne because there were rules that you had to follow for how you got those things done. Only poetry among all of the arts was considered something that was made, something that was like original to the poet, because the word for poetry is poiesis, to make. And that's still not creating. But to the Greeks, poetry came the closest to making something from scratch. Even Plato, in his Republic, which was written in the 300s BCE, he said, "Will we say of a painter that he makes something? Certainly not. He merely imitates." And so even if you were, painting something that you had never seen before, you were imitating kind of what was possible that you had seen in your life, at least early on. And if you made a piece of art, it was because you discovered it. You didn't create it. Or it was inspired by an external guide, like a muse. In ancient Rome, they get a word for create. Creatio. And then you can be someone who creates. You can be an artist. You can be a fabricator. So they have creatio, they have facere, they have creare, and they include painting and sculpting as well as poetry within these creative arts. Although they took the concept of a muse or a daemon from ancient Greece and turned that into a genius, which is where we get the word. Ooh. This was used probably around the 2nd century for the first time, and it meant an external guardian who whispered, who inspired, there's that connection there, inspired creative thoughts in a person's brain. And then from ancient Rome, we get to medieval Christianity in Europe, the medieval period, and the medieval Christians take that creatio, and in the context of the Bible, it becomes creatio ex nihilo, creation from nothing. And only God can create something from nothing. So only God is creative. And we kind of regress to an even more limited scope of creativity than the ancient Greeks had. And we're going to keep that idea for several hundred years until we get to the Renaissance. And between like 1400 and 1800, a few different movements happened that really paved the way for humans taking back the mantle of creativity. The first is the Renaissance humanism movement, which at first was just encouraging people to dive into the humanities more, like read ancient texts from other cultures. And when you are reading things from other points of view, you start to empathize. You start to question what you've been taught. You start to think more critically. And that kind of blossomed into the humanism movement later on, which was placing humans closer to the center of the universe and the discourse. So a great example of Renaissance humanism is Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Mm-hmm. It's that sketch that has the naked man and his arms and legs are out and there's a circle around him. This was Leonardo da Vinci reading ancient texts, specifically an ancient text about architecture from Vitruvius, the architect Vitruvius in Rome from the year 25 BCE. And in this piece called On Architecture, Vitruvius talked about the proper proportions for things, for buildings, for like landscape, and for people. And Da Vinci was drawing out those proper proportions. And in doing so, he's connecting the Renaissance humanism movement to what humanism eventually becomes, because this image puts humans at the center of the circle of the universe, and not just like any human that would be depicted at the time in 1400s Italy, but a naked human, which kind of actively rejects the modesty of the church and is revolutionary in its own way. The next movement that's really important here is the rise of the merchant class, which has been happening since the Crusades, so for a few hundred years by 1400. But over that time, merchants get more power and more money because trade becomes more necessary and more accessible around the world. So there's more demand for the merchants and they can charge more for their supply. And the third is the Enlightenment. This is the 1600s and 1700s. The Enlightenment is encouraging rational scientific thought. This is where we get the heliocentric movement, where we physically place Earth away from the center of the universe and put it moving around the sun and restructure the entire cosmos, thus kind of fracturing the legitimacy of the church in some people's eyes. And all of that together led to people being more accepting of the human doing something that was previously considered divine. The human can now not just have a genius, but be their own genius. The human can now be creative, and all art is considered creative because people are making it.
We love that.
And in the 1900s or so is when science starts to be considered creative.
Okay.
But then we get this question, now that people can be creative, of nature versus nurture. Is creativity innate? Are we born with it? Is it a gift from God? Or can it be learned? And if you can learn it, is that offensive to God? These are like real questions that people were asking. But there are really lots of people on different sides of this debate. John Locke was a philosopher in the 1600s, and he's famous for the tabula rasa, the blank slate philosophy. He says, suppose the mind to be a tabula rasa without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished from experience? So you have to go out and live and perceive things and learn stuff and fail and try and like get all of that experience before you can be creative, before you can be a genius. Although they still don't have the word creative around the time of John Locke, not in the way we use it. That starts to be used in the very late 1600s, early 1700s. In 1759, English poet Edward Young, he's writing a letter to his friend who's just written a book, and they're discussing the idea of an original, which is what they were calling creatives at the time. And this is from his piece, Conjectures on Original Composition. He says, an original rises spontaneously from the vital root of genius. It grows, it is not made. Later that century, Immanuel Kant, the famed German philosopher. He is writing The Critique of Judgment, and he agrees with Edward Young. He says that genius, or the skill of being an original, is apportioned to each immediately from the hand of nature and dies with him. So God gives you the ability to be creative, and you keep it for your entire life. You can't change that. He then goes on to say that genius is entirely opposed to the spirit of imitation, and that learning is nothing but imitation. So they're coming down on the side of, no, you can't learn to be creative. And in fact, learning is detrimental to the core of being creative. Yes. This was a widely held belief in the 1700s. There were people writing articles about how the genius doesn't need to be in school. The genius doesn't need to practice. The genius is just, born knowing their craft.
Oh, no.
Exactly. Not good. It takes until the 1950s for science to really catch up to the philosophical debates about creativity and genius and originality. And so let's fast forward to 1950, which is the start of the creativity boom, the rapid growth of research into creativity. And I think we can really trace it back to one man. His name is Joy Paul Guilford, or J.P. Guilford, and he is known among psychologists for his work in describing the structure of intellect theory, which said that intelligence can't be summed up by one number alone. So you can't just give an IQ value and then understand how smart a person is. Intellect, not like the brain itself, but the metaphysical structure of the mind, is a three-dimensional structure where the three dimensions are contents, so the information that the mind takes in, operations, the things that the mind can do with that information, and products, how the mind stores that information later. So you can take in visual or audio or semantic information, and then you can run operations like evaluating or remembering or convergent and divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is really closely connected to creativity. It's thinking differently from how the typical person would operate on this information. And then you produce or you sort that information into different classes or different systems that you've already sorted in your brain previously.
That sounds familiar.
Does it?
Yeah, I feel like I connect to that kind of maybe the overall process of just how I absorb information, and why I laughed earlier when you said that, they didn't believe that learning improved creativity, because I'm no, but then I do put the things I'm learning in these mental buckets unconsciously, and sometimes literally on my YouTube playlists.
Yeah, we as humans love categorizing things. We love to put things in their little boxes or on their right playlists or something.
I really do. I definitely am that person.
Well, then, J.P. Guilford, we have another data point for you. He's almost certainly not with us anymore.
Yeah, probably not.
Because in 1950, he was already, at a high point in his career. So at 1950, he gave a speech to the American Psychological Association where he called for the community to get really serious about creativity research. And when you look at graphs for how often different words were used in published sources over time, there is a ridiculous uptick after 1950 in this graph. And that concern or that encouragement was spurred by fears of mechanization and automation right after World War II. People wanted to make sure that they were returning to jobs that were still open to them after the war. And companies that had started selling more and like kind of making more profit through the war machine, they wanted to continue making that profit. So they wanted to get creative with marketing. And so some of the early creativity practice, if not like scientific research, is from marketing companies.
Sorry, audience, in this lecture, but as someone who works in corporate marketing, as a creative person, it's just really funny. It's just so funny.
Yeah, you're really part of the vanguard here.
Yeah, it sounds great.
It is. I'm glad we have this information now. I'm not glad that we are so easily manipulated by the creative marketing. But if we were going to study creativity, we needed a way to quantify it. At least that's how it works in Western science. So they developed a bunch of different tests over the years to test creativity. And one of the earlier, more successful tests was called the Remote Associations Test, developed by wife and husband team Martha and Sarnoff Mednick in 1959. And this was a word association test where you were given a sequence of words and then you had to figure out what word connected them. So I have a few examples for you, Bestie, if you would like to practice.
Yeah, because I sometimes play New York Times Connections, which is basically, I think, this.
Yes. Yes. This is basically an easier version of connections. So if I give you the words black, fox, and man.
Oh, because space. Black hole, foxhole, manhole.
Yes,
okay,
yes,
great.
Hole. And so some of the tests are like that, where it's, a word that would come after all of the words, so like a suffix. Some of them are more abstract. So if I give you bald, scout, and screech.
Sorry, screech initially made me think of Saved by the Bell. So then that distracted my brain. Is it bald eagle, eagle scout, and eagle screech? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, so not necessarily like this is a common term, eagle screech, but eagles do screech, and so they are all associated with that. And so some of the test questions are more direct than others.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. And I have one last one for you. If I give you bite, monkey, and widow, what connects those all?
Widow, monkey, bite. Well, spider is on my brain a lot lately because of Spider-Man. So I'm going to go with spider bite, spider monkey, and widow. Yeah, widow is a type of spider.
Like a black widow.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Fantastic job. You would have done very well on this test.
If only the Times did not make you pay for their games, I would be killing it at Connections every day.
I'm sure you would. This is a great test in some ways. Like, you can quantify it based on how quickly people respond, how much their response aligns with how people have responded before. I did test this out a little bit before this, and for the, Black Fox Man, someone said Michael B. Jordan.
Because Michael J. Fox.
Oh, well, because Michael B. Jordan is a fox.
Okay, got it.
Because he is a black man who is a fox. And I was like, yes, that is not what the testers would have planned, but that absolutely fits. And it's like a perfectly creative answer to the question.
Exactly.
Yes. But in many ways, the remote associations test not a good test because it's not generative. It's not asking the subject to come up with anything that they themselves produce. It's focused on verbal skills. So if you are creative in other ways, like more writing, more drawing, more kinetic, then you're not going to do as well on this test as you could. And it's culturally biased. Like, if you don't know these words, if you don't know these terms, like why would you do well? And that doesn't mean you're less creative or intelligent. You just don't know those terms. So we had more work to do in finding a good creativity test. And these days, one of the top gold standard tests to use is the Torrance test, which was at first developed by Ellis Paul Torrance. He first administered the tests in 1958 with school children, and then over the next several decades, he updated it to be good for older students and then adults. And it was really just a barrage of different tests. Some of them were verbal, some of them were nonverbal. A few examples of tests they might have to take. So they might be given an incomplete shape. So I have an example here. Imagine a circle, but the top and bottom of the circle are erased. Like the 12 and 6 o'clock are erased so that it looks like two semicircles together. the test subjects would get a bunch of those shapes and then have to draw around them, like complete it to create something interesting. So you could turn that shape into a sun or a clock. And those would be kind of like low-level creative answers. So you get 1 point for those. You could get multiple points if you get more creative with it. So turning that shape into a button or a target, like a bullseye target, or like a hamburger or something. And then you can imagine getting more creative from there and getting more points as you get more creative. And I really like a test like this. I don't know if I would do very well, but I enjoy it because it's timed and it just really shows creativity, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
They were asked some hypotheticals and to complete some stories. So they were asked, for example, what happened when the cow jumped over the moon? Tell me the rest of that story. Tell me why the cow was jumping over the moon. They were asked to do an updated version of a test that J.P. Guilford created called the unusual uses test or the alternative uses test, where you have an object and the test taker needs to list as many creative uses for that object as possible. So if I show you a tin can, Connie, how many uses for a tin can can you think of?
Like at least 5, like a flower pot, an actual, like a cup, a scooper if you need to scoop some stuff, that telephone game that you can do with tin cans with the string, and, you know, you put that's where the green beans come from, go. So there as a...
So I heard 4 receptacles and one phone. Four containers. I mean, one phone. Yeah. I think originally with J.P. Guilford, it was a brick, and then Ellis Torrance was like, these school children should probably think about something a little less dangerous and destructive. So he changed it to either a book or a tin can. Happy Muses Month, friends! I hope you are ready for a whole month of creativity-themed episodes, and if you happen to get a copy of my book, absolutely no pressure to do so. But if you get one, I want to see it. I want to see it in your hands. Please take a picture and tag us. We are Pale Blue Pod on Instagram. I am Go Astro Mo everywhere. It would just bring me so much joy. Thank you in advance for that. But back to the moment at hand. Connie is currently stripping a whole pile of tin cans for parts because she has a bunch of ideas now that she's not on the spot. So while she's occupied, I have one very important message for you. Friends, if you like Pale Blue Pod and you want us to keep making it, we need your help. There are 4 ways that you can help us. The first, and the most important, is to spread the word. Review us on whatever podcast app you prefer and share an episode with a friend. Word of mouth is so powerful, and the more listeners we have, the more we can rely on support from sponsors and advertisements and less on support from you. Which brings me to the second thing you can do to help us, which is directly supporting us on Patreon. Thank you so much to the patrons who already support us financially every single month. We could not do this show without your help. We especially want to thank and give a huge shout out to our sun-like stars, Scott Reynolds, Tom T., Seven Petrichor, Ashley Shambo, Bruce Sedloff, and Kelly Bennell. Thank you so, so much. Our awesome patrons get to hear their name on the show, make it onto our patron star chart, get research notes for most episodes, and for this month, to celebrate my book coming out, all patrons get early access to the first chapter of my book about the invention of the telescope and the modern genius. You can become a stellar patron of ours for $5 a month at patreon.com/palebluepod, or you could make a one-time donation at the PayPal link in the episode description and become a supernova in the Pale Blue Pod sky. The third thing you can do to help us is to buy our merch. I have been putting the final touches on the Oracle cards this weekend, and I love them so much. I can't wait for you all to see the full deck because Monique Steele did her big one. She did such an amazing job. You can check out our Oracle deck along with our other amazing merch with Certified Crucial at the link in the description. It's certifiedcrucial.com/collections and then go to Pale Blue Pod. And finally, the fourth thing you can do to help us this week is take the annual Multitude survey. If you have a few minutes to spare, let us know what you like about Pale Blue Pod and how we can improve. In the past, people have suggested new episode formats or topics or merch ideas, and it was really helpful to hear from you, the listeners. We want to know what you want, so go to multitudeshows.com/survey to help us make the show its best version. You will be rewarded with a collage of pet pictures from people in the Multitude Collective, so you won't be disappointed. But no matter what you do, if you do any of these four things to help us, I just want to say thank you for listening. Connie and I are honored to be a part of your week. Speaking of, she's already made a chainmail bracelet out of the can opener tabs and combined a bunch of cans into some kind of giant makeshift pan pipe. I am truly in awe of her creativity. But let's get back to this discussion before she gets a little too carried away. Now that we have these tests, we can do more studies into creativity because we can quantify it and compare people. And the different branches of study for creativity are like the bio-neuro side, where you're trying to find physical structures in the body that correspond to creativity, and then the more psychosocial side. So we'll talk about the neurobio research projects first. And there, the goal question to answer is, where is the creativity organ or gene? Mm-hmm. If you're like me, maybe you heard growing up that creativity lives in a particular part of the brain.
I always forget which side. So every time I think in that like binary, I'm always like, I don't even remember which one is which, but like creativity is maybe on the right and analytical thinking is on the left.
Correct. Yeah. That is what people said. That is bupkis. That's bull. That's not true.
Okay.
That's just a myth that is rooted in a real scientific study from 1960 where Roger Sperry studied subjects that had their corpus callosums split. The corpus callosum is the material that connects the two hemispheres, left and right, of the brain. And he studied cats and monkeys whose corpus callosums he split. Not himself. Like, there was probably an intern who did it. But his team had the callosums split. And then he studied humans. He did not split them himself. The humans had their corpus callosum split from medical procedures already. So they volunteered for the studies. And he studied their brains doing different tasks. And what Sperry found was really interesting. It seems like a lot of the structures on the left side of your brain are corresponding to the right side of your body, or things in the right side of your visual field, and vice versa. And he did find that the left side of the brain is more strongly associated with language processing and development, and that the right side is more associated with spatial reasoning and spatial understanding. And then over time, that just got like exaggerated into left side equals logic, right side equals creativity.
Sounds about right.
But that's been debunked several times in multiple studies where people are in like MRI machines or something, and you can see that creativity is happening on all sides of the brain. And so that's what I'm going to talk about next. There's this really cool fMRI study on jazz musicians that happened twice, once in 2008 and once in 2025. In 2008, what are their names? I think it's Charles Lim and Roger Braun, maybe, but Lim and Braun, they asked a group of jazz musicians to play inside an fMRI machine, and they would play music that they read, and then they would improvise. And the study was to see if there's a difference between brain activity when you're playing sheet music versus improvising. And there was. What they noticed was that when they are improvising their music, there's a deactivation of the dorsolateral frontal cortex, which is a part of the brain that's associated more with like executive decision making, and that there were a lot of activations in the medial frontal cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex. And that then became the part of the brain that was associated with creativity because of this study and some others. But in 2025, some researchers kind of recreated the study. They asked jazz musicians to play improv and sheet music and also play from memory in an fMRI machine. And instead of just looking at like individual parts of the brain, they were looking at connected networks throughout the brain. Because in the 17 years between these two studies, neuroscientists figured out that there are more of these connected systems working together in the brain instead of like parts working individually. And so when they tested the jazz musicians, they found that improving activated 3 different parts of the brain a lot. One of them was the salience network, which helps you like evaluate things that are going on right now and figure out like what's important. And then the executive network was also lit up, and that helps you with like executive decision making and planning. And a third that lit up was the default mode network, which people talk about operating kind of like your back burner thoughts. It's like operating in the background whenever you're not actively consciously thinking about something, but your brain is still working on the problem. And people were initially confused. Like, why is the part of the brain that's focused on things right now and the part of the brain that's like focused on things in the background, how can they both be activated by the same process? But I love this study because it just shows that creativity is a more nuanced, more complicated process than we thought it was. So that's the neuroscience part of it. People have also looked for genetic markers for creativity. There are so many different studies on this, and it seems like they don't agree on how heritable creativity is as a genetic trait. I saw some estimates as low as 20%. So like you inherit 20% of your potential for creativity from your parents. And I saw estimates as high as 70%. So it's really hard to tell. But what does seem clear is that the genetic markers associated with creativity are distinct from the genetic markers associated with intelligence. Okay. So there's some overlap, but this, to me, is pretty intuitive because I know a bunch of very creative people. I don't know if they can read all of them. Yeah. And I know a bunch of people who can solve like multivariable calculus equations basically in their minds. Couldn't come up with a 6th use for the tin can if they tried.
Totally.
And then on the psychosocial side of the experimenting, this is where I think it gets really interesting because you can do the IRB is more likely to approve your social psych experiment into creativity than your biological one, I feel. And the social psychologists, they're asking questions like, how does creativity manifest and how can it be fostered? And one of my favorite studies like this is the 1958 IPAR study, or the Institute for Personality Assessment and Research at UC Berkeley, led by Donald McKinnon, who in World War II, one of his jobs was figuring out who would be a good spy. So he was like he was an expert at assessing personality. Yeah. And then in the creativity research boom, he got swept up and he wanted to do this big study on the most creative architects that he could get his hands on. So one January weekend in 1958, 124 architects, including 40 of the top architects that lived in or could get to California, like I.M. Pei, who was the only architect whose name I recognized, but they were important architects. They all got together on Berkeley's campus and were subjected to a flood of tests, like more than the Torrance test of creativity. They had to do something very similar to filling in the blanks of the drawing. So like they were given some lines and they had to connect them in creative ways. They were also given some finish this story type of tests. They were asked some strange hypotheticals, some of them ethical, like if you were hired by someone whose values didn't agree with yours and whose aesthetic preferences didn't agree with yours, would you still work with them? Or if human beings developed a third arm, where would it be and how would we use it?
I need one for all my back because doing the back of my hair, especially as a lock girly, oh my gosh, Black girls would actually be like, yes, this is my third arm, and it helps to do the back of my hairdo, because you need something like doing your hair as a Black girl is arm day. So I think we would need, it would help and even things out.
I 100% agree, and that would be the strongest arm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
They were also given tests to see how suggestible they were. So they would have people estimate distances to some object, like first alone and then with other people, and see if they changed their minds, changed their guess based on what other people said. They also gave them a mosaic design test where they were given a bunch of little mosaic tiles and asked to make a design that they find aesthetically pleasing. And one of the people submitted an array of just white tiles because the simplicity was pleasing to him. His name was Eero Saarinen. He's the architect who designed the arch in St. Louis, the one that Percy Jackson supposedly jumped off of. And Eero Saarinen, in a different test where they had all the architects rank each other in terms of creativity, Eero Saarinen of the white tile mosaic was named the most creative.
Based on just the mosaic or the rest of his work? Because I assume it's they knew his work and they were like, actually, I don't even care about this. I just know that one building that I love or whatever.
Right. I think it was just in general and not based on the mosaics themselves.
Yeah.
But this is just a selection of the tests that they went through over that entire weekend. And the results weren't published. They were hidden in boxes and not discovered until 2016 when a journalist published a piece about them. Yeah. But what they did find was that the characteristics that the most creative people had were characteristics like self-awareness and open-mindedness and flexibility. And that has come up over and over again in creativity research. There was another study a decade later in 1968 by Land and Jarman. I don't know their first names. Oops. It was a longitudinal study on young children funded by NASA to see how creative humans could be over time, where they found 1,600 school children. Actually, they were between the ages of 3 and 5, so preschool children, and gave them creativity tests and followed them over 10 years.
Wow.
When they were in that early stage, the 3 to 5 age range, 98% of the kids were creatively excellent. They scored really highly on the creativity tests. They tested the same kids again when they were 10 years old. Only 30 of them were creatively excellent. And then when they tested the kids again at age 15, only 12% of them were creatively excellent. Then they graduated and we couldn't track them. And so Land and Jarman found a sample of 280,000 adults. The average age was 31, and gave creativity tests to them, and only 2% of adults were creatively excellent. So the conclusion from this study was that schools and learning stifle divergent thinking, so they stifle creativity. I think it's more just that they stifle play and whimsy, which we've since learned is really important to the creative process. But we also know that learning is really valuable. So it's not that school is bad, but school can train some of the most important parts of the creative practice out of you.
Yeah, I do think that's why it's hard to track it genetically, because there are so many environmental factors to how creative someone gets to be, especially when you splice in intersectionality and kids in Black communities, the schools don't have the same resources and other things. So it really can affect how we even research things because of the environmental factors that stifle our research in addition to creative thinking.
Yes. I mean, a lot of the research has also been done on the appropriate environment to foster this creativity. And there are a lot of very real economic barriers to so many people even creating that type of environment.
Yeah.
Although I think maybe this will shock some people, because we think about necessity being the mother of invention. So if you like really need something, if there's some reward on the other side, then you will innovate, or offering some people a prize or a reward for being creative. But in 1971, there was a research study that found extrinsic motivators decreased creativity output. So if you are trying to do something for money or for fame, or because people are telling you you have to do it, you are less likely to create something truly innovative. You're less likely to remember the process and like what went into it, and you're less likely to enjoy it, most importantly of all. So if you're creating, do it because you enjoy it. Do it because you recognize that it's going to help you live up to your potential. Do it because it's something you think is important in the world. All intrinsically motivated.
Yeah.
So after all of these studies, we still don't have a conclusive answer to where creativity comes from. Is it a magical guide that follows you around and whispers inspiration into your ear? Is it some divine gift? I like to think of it that way, but I know that that's not the entire truth of what it is. It also appears to be some evolutionary advantage to innovate in our surroundings that we got that the other Homo species did not get. It happened, we think, around like 60 to 100,000 years ago. Some adaptation appeared that made us better at, I don't know, creatively adapting to our environments somehow. Is it instead more about mindset and circumstances, like we've been talking about? Some researchers have put out lists of the different mindsets that you should practice in order to cultivate your own creativity. One of these practices that you should get used to is having some limited solitude, some time alone, so that you can reflect on what you've learned and synthesize it into a creative process or output. You need to have some time when you're not actively doing anything. We are so constantly stimulated these days, between our phones, between just the noise around us, the pollution around us, and the world going on. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily have a lot of time to let our default mode network act in the background. We never turn off the front burner and just let the back burner run. So we need to cultivate that practice. Creative people are more open-minded. They're non-judgmental of themselves and others and their ideas, right? They reflect more. They're more alert and more like aware of their surroundings a lot of the time. And they are disciplined. Maybe not in the way of like writing your morning pages every day or sitting down at the same time to draw your sketch for the day, but they figure out what their process is and they stick to that process and they commit to doing that again and again and again. Part of that is it might turn into like a ritual or like an almost superstition for some creatives, and that's okay. I wrote my entire first book pretty much under a blanket. I called it my writing fort, and it really helped me get into the mindset of a 10 plus billion-year-old galaxy. So was it embarrassing to do this at coffee shops and WeWorks?
Oh, publicly, bestie, publicly.
A little, but it worked. It worked for me. And that is discipline. Sticking to what works for me, even though it was a little embarrassing.
Yeah, I think that's where most creatives often do have like the wackiest rituals or something strange that just they do, and it's just the thing that gets them into their process, and it varies. And I think part of what you said earlier about that background noise, like we don't have time where we let the background noise run by like just by itself, so we don't come up with all of those ideas all the time, you know? Like it's hard to experiment in this day and age, because everything is kind of on demand so fast. It's very difficult to have time to play.
Yes, play is so important. But no matter where creativity comes from, it seems that we are experiencing a shortage these days. Mm-hmm. We are in not just a literacy crisis, not just a climate crisis, not just an economic crisis or a political crisis, but also a creativity crisis.
Mm-hmm.
When it rains, it pours.
Really?
We have been in a creativity crisis since the 1990s. That's according to Dr. Kyung-hee Kim, who is a creativity and imagination researcher. She's a professor at the College of William and Mary, and she studied her PhD under Ellis Torrance. She published this paper in 2011 where she said, look, I've gone through the backlogs of creativity scores from the 1990s, and our scores have been dropping steadily since then, which is confusing some people because IQ scores have been steadily increasing in the same time period. Actually, for longer than that. This is called the Flynn effect. It says that every generation tends to have higher IQs than the previous generation since the early 1900s when we started doing IQ tests. And that is because of better resources and better public education and like all of that stuff. But this is showing us clearly there is not a strong correlation between intellect and creativity. Not that IQ tests are perfect by any means, but we do seem to be getting smarter. We also seem to be getting less creative. People wonder why. Dr. Kim attributed part of it to schools teaching to tests instead of just teaching, like interesting material that is useful for life. And I think that these days, a lot of the decline in creativity is because of homogenized media. It's really hard to find different types of shows or books. People talk the same because we're watching the same stuff. We hear the same music for the most part in the mainstream, and that narrows our creative view. Also, a large reliance on generative AI has been quantitatively shown to make us dumber and less creative. The neural connections in our brains become less dense. We become worse at recalling information. And people are complaining about having to write like a paragraph.
Yeah.
On Love Island, they were asked to write letters of love, and multiple islanders asked for ChatGPT. Like kind of jokingly, like, oh, I wish I had ChatGPT, but girl,
yeah,
you can't
even as a
write
joke.
a letter. Yeah. So that, to me, is a real sign of the creativity crisis. And this was essentially why I started writing my book in the first place. In one of the chapters, I talk about the history of human imagination. There was this philosopher named Richard Kearney in 1988. We actually had to do like a legal check because he's still around, and I talk about him in the book. So they had to like check to see if he would sue me. But
always good to check.
Always good to be careful. Yes. Richard Kearney, in 1988, he published a theory where he broke down humanity's phases of imagination into 3 different stages. The first stage was called the mimetic period of human imagination, where art is meant to mimic other art. Because the point of art, or very early on in humanity, like very early on for human civilization, was to represent icons, represent like deities with specific characteristics to be recognized by other people later. I have a picture here. I'm going to ask if anyone can recognize who this is. It's an ancient Egyptian deity. Connie, can you recognize this figure?
Is it Horus?
So close.
My second guess is Osiris. Oh no!
I should have done like a Greek one for you maybe or something.
No, it's fine. I need to brush up on my Egyptian. I really do.
For the listeners, I'd say the most salient feature of this figure is a large red disc above his head, and the disc is surrounded by a little snake, a little python. This is Ra. Ra is the sun god, and so is always represented with this big red disc above his head. He often will have a bird type face.
That's what distracted me.
I think it's a falcon. Yeah, but the red circle is the thing to look for. And today, if you know anything about Ra, you can identify him on site because of this iconography, because of the mimetic period of art. And that didn't make this any less creative, even though it wasn't original, because back then, the point of being creative, the point of art was not to be novel, was not to do something that no one had seen before, but to do something that people would recognize later. The second stage of human imagination, according to Kearney, is the anthropocentric stage, where humans start inserting themselves into the art more and start making art about their lived experiences. This is where art becomes a vehicle for self-expression. And it's around the 1400s, although there aren't exact time periods for any of these stages. And then in the third stage, called the parodic stage, art functions like mostly as a vehicle to comment on other things. So you would use a piece of art to maybe do political satire or to be a reference point for you to make some other commentary. Okay, so there are these three stages. In each of the stages, the artist has inserted themselves more into the art. It becomes more about expression or a creative twist and less about originality. But each phase is about expression. Right. So when I read this, it really cemented my understanding of creativity, that at its core, it's not about making something original, but that it's about expressing something that is original because you're expressing something for you and no one else has been you. So what I argue in my book, going back to the creativity crisis and my motivation for writing Mothers of Invention, is that we have entered a fourth phase of imagination, which I call the personality or celebrity phase. This is why we're in the era of reboots. Like, why is there a new Cheetah Girls movie? Why is only one of them black?
Yeah.
Why are we listening to celebrities when it comes to medical advice? Do you remember the tweet about Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend's balls? Because I do. It haunts me.
Yeah. That was a bad time.
And then there are influencers now. I'm going to show a picture of Hawk to a Girl and see if they can recognize Hawk to a Girl. She has a net worth of almost $1 million. This never would have happened in previous stages of human imagination. We would not have glamorized this type of vapid incompetence. We just wouldn't. And so we are now in this fourth phase where art doesn't express your faith or your worldview or your opinions on other art, but instead the purpose of art is to redirect attention back to the creator. We have devalued creative labor and expertise. That's why Nicki Minaj can tell people not to take the COVID vaccine, because we don't care about the doctors who spent over a decade learning their craft. That's why it's hard to get new movies made, because the studios would rather put known actors with known intellectual property on a screen because they think it's a bigger guarantee for money than to test out an untried, truly creative piece of art.
And then when they get it, they don't learn the right lessons.
Truly. Because they're not even really paying attention to the art these days. In the fourth phase of imagination, the artist is more important than the art itself. We don't even ask them to make art anymore. We are content with people just making content.
Yep. I think it's also why AI has, I'm going to say flourish because of like the way it's like flooded the market, but it's because people think they can shortcut their way to success, which is all, again, about personality.
100%. Yes. We would not have seen this boom in generative AI if we weren't already in the fourth phase of imagination. And I think we started to move into the fourth phase. Like, there's overlap between all the phases always, but I think we started to move into the fourth phase in the 1950s when we developed the film star and TV star industry.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, that's chapter 7 in the book. We have this problem. I'm not just going to leave it there. I'm going to talk about how we can fix it. There are ways to kickstart creativity. People were thinking about this very early on in creativity research, like Alex Osborne in 1953, who was a marketing executive at some company. And in the wake of World War II, he came up with the idea of brainstorming. Like there was a person who
What?
invented brainstorming. Yes. And of course, like people have been doing this. Yeah.
But like
but he
first
formalized
phrase.
it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. He wrote in a book called Applied Imagination in 1953, the 4 rules to brainstorming. Officially, the first rule is to generate as many ideas as possible. Do not limit yourself. The second rule is to judge at the end, not while you're coming up with ideas. The third rule is to be expansive, like truly think outside the box, which you can only do if you're not judging yourself. And then the fourth is to basically piggyback off of other ideas. Like it's totally fine if your idea isn't 100% original. As we've discussed, that's not the point of creativity anyway. But you like piggyback off of someone's idea if it makes sense, but it's not like all the way there, and work together. Some other ways that you can kickstart creativity if you find yourself in a rut, according to science, are to get moving, go for a walk, get outside, expose yourself to new stimuli.
Yeah.
One you might like, bestie, take a nap.
I love that one. Yes.
They've shown that sleeping can, activate or let those default mode networks work in the back of your brain, not like physically, literally in the back of your brain. It's spread throughout. But dreaming can help people come up with creative ideas. So going to sleep, yes. But even more helpful than that is almost falling asleep. There is a deeply creative state that you enter when you're just on the verge of sleep. So when you're falling asleep or when you're just waking up, called hypnagogia.
I gotta say, it's so frustrating, bestie. I have that. It happens to me a lot. And then I'm like, okay, I want to keep this idea. And then it disappears. It floats into thin air as I fall asleep all peacefully. And like a pillow's feather, it floats into the air and away. And I've tried to write it down on paper. I've tried to write it on my phone and just, yeah. So I gotta try the other techniques and add it in to my napping.
Yes. I mean, there are people who train themselves to write down an idea as soon as they wake up. The best people can stop themselves before they get to the sleeping point. Salvador Dali used to drift off with a nail in his hand, and when he got sleepy enough, the nail would fall and wake him up when he was in that hypnagogic state, and then he would paint whatever he saw while he was in that state.
Interesting.
And I have a picture of him with his classic iconic mustache. And you can say what you want about Salvador Dali. I know that he wasn't a perfect person, but that's a great fucking mustache.
Yeah.
And I trust someone with that mustache about creativity.
It's creative, that's for sure. That might be why I got at least, decent grades on my procrastination papers in high school, because I too would be setting an alarm on my phone so that I could take a 20-minute nap. And sometimes I probably did startle awake during that moment of this is what I can say. This is how I can reorganize it and stuff like that. So that feels familiar too.
You know, Ball.
That's great. This has been great, bestie.
Yeah. Are you left with more questions about creativity or anything?
Bestie, this, for me personally, this has ignited that little spark in my heart that said that because I went to NYU and I studied communication, so a lot of this, there was a lot of familiarity here, and I was like, right, and in the Dark Ages and then the 1500s, and I'm and the printing press, so that people could have literature and creativity for themselves, and it's not gatekept. And so at NYU, there is, there are different schools, and one of them, Gallatin, I forget what its sub name is, but you can declare a major in just about anything, and it gets silly, the silliest ones get PR, but it's you can study happiness or you can study death or whatever. And I always said that the one that I would choose would probably be about creativity. And so it just sparked my little heart in that way. And the overlap of communications and the stuff that I've learned there, but also literally all the marketing executives involved. That's funny. That is funny because it is odd to be in that place of something that is a creative industry, but also is very analytical and very we need the numbers to match. And sometimes the things that make the best numbers are not the things that are, one, obviously the most creative, but also may not necessarily reach your particular audience. So definitely a thing I think we all need is more creativity. So let's not do a whole Dark Ages, guys. Like, let's kind of like get to the Enlightenment real quick.
Yes, we're due for well, we did just have a Renaissance. I need Beyonce to come up with an Enlightenment album now.
I know. She's kicking it off. So maybe that will truly be the first part of the era where we get back to the Enlightenment. Because, man, it's rough out here. So thank you for these ideas, bestie. And thank you for walking us through it because, yeah, it does kind of give me that, like, lightness of, right, yeah, I'm creative. I can be creative. Let's go be creative.
Yeah. What's your favorite way to get your creativity out, your favorite creative outlet?
Interesting. I'm a little bit of a creator of all types, it feels like. Dabble in all of them. In some days, it used to be like writing. Right now, I've been coloring a lot, so that's been really nice. And getting into like a more artsy painting, watercolor vibe. I've gone through photography phases, and I feel that like calling back into me. So, but right now, I'm also trying to be creative with like digital design because I've been obviously helping with podcast stuff and social media posts, and I don't always like what I make. So I think it's what I said earlier, like learning new things really does amplify the creative process because it's been helping me to make some new things. It's just by going on YouTube and watching people who do interesting things do what they do. And that also helps spark the creativity. I think we think about creativity like by yourself a lot or like you and a muse. But I also think that like the marketing executive said, like piggying back with one another with like collaboration and communication, it really does help that process because it's not just your brain thinking of things and you can amplify and get other ideas out. So I think that those are my final thoughts after that. It's a lot.
Yeah, clearly it's sparked a lot. So
yeah.
I'm glad maybe you can go and create something fun after this. Well, listeners, no matter how bright the creative spark within you is right now, you're still space.
Pale Blue Pod is hosted by Dr. Moiya McTier and Connie Gibbs. Moiya created the show with the funny and talented Karine Caputo with help from the Multitude Productions team.
Our theme music is by Evan Johnston, our cover art by Shay McMullen, and our audio editing is handled by the superlative Misha Stanton.
Stay in touch with us and the universe by following @PaleBluePod on Instagram or check out our website, palebluepod.com.
I, Moiya, am Go Astro Mo on all socials.
And I'm @ConStar24 on Instagram.
If you want to support our show, join our community at patreon.com/palebluepod or send this episode to your family and friends group chats.
We're a member of Multitude, an independent podcast collective and production studio. If you like Pale Blue Pod, you will love the other shows that live on our website at multitude.productions.
Thanks for listening to Pale Blue Pod. We'll be back next week.